All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. And in today's video, I want to discuss a Dave Ramsey clip that I saw last evening, actually, and it relates to the whole debate of active versus passive investing. So let's get to it here. Let me reduce my screen. And the title of this video, obviously, the guy was hostile to Dave. Dave, you're stupid and arrogant. Are you smarter than Warren Buffett? Let's get into it.
Couple things. One, you've done some great work, and in some ways, I love you. In other ways, you're stupid and arrogant.
Okay. How can I help you?
All right.
By the way, that's a great way to start any conversation right there.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, my first question would be, are you smarter than Warren Buffett?
How old are you?
Because you push. I'm 35.
Okay, cool. So what? I'm sorry. Let's stop just a second. What's the point of your call? How can I help you?
The point of my call is you push people into actively managed funds when over time, if you pushed people into an index fund, they would have about 50% more money when they retire.
Okay. Not sure where you went to school for your math class, but you failed.
Actually, compounding costs
I understand.
add up dramatically.
I got socks older than you. I've been teaching this a while, okay? So this is how this works. Now, here's the thing. You're basically doing what Bogle said, and Bogle invented a wonderful thing with the index fund, and the S&P 500 funds are wonderful. The index funds are wonderful.
So what he's doing here is the guy is essentially regurgitating the spirit of Jack Bogle. He's a Boglehead, an indexer. And one of the things I found is that you'll find indexers are very cult-like. They very much have blinders on that indexing is the one and only way to invest. And anyone who partakes in active management is partaking in a fool's game, a losing game, and that no one can beat the market, no mutual fund, no hedge fund. And so, obviously coming from Jack Bogle, and there's other books that promote indexing, and they're great books. Like J.L. Collins' Simple Path to Wealth is one. So that's what you see here is you see this guy coming at Dave Ramsey from the spirit that passive indexing is always far superior to active management.
They are not a cure-all, and there's no possible scenario, unless you're an absolute idiot in picking your actively managed funds, that you would have 50% more in an index fund. Now, the actual facts are more than 50% of the funds underperform the indexes. That is a true fact, to your point.
That's a different fact. The fact is 2% above, if you have a 7% return versus a 9% return, which you have the comp.
So there, I think the guy is getting a little confused. He's using the 2%. The traditional 2 and 20 is related to hedge funds. Dave, I believe, does mutual funds, not hedge funds. I don't know of any mutual funds. I'm sure there's some that are out there that have a 2% management fee. Just from a cursory look, you're going to find maybe 0.5, 0.75, 0.9, certainly not as low as the 0.03 that you'll find in vanilla index funds. But they generally don't have that 2 and 20 model. Certainly not the 20% of profits that a lot of hedge funds have, but most don't even have that 2%. So yeah, I just think his math there. I mean, I understand what he's thinking that, if you're doing a 2% management fee, it's going to make a 2% difference.
Pounding costs, bringing your return down by 2%. Over 50 years, you'll have half the money. Do the math on that.
Well,
Google it.
That would be true too, but none of those numbers you're using are accurate in terms of what the S&P has produced or what actively managed funds have produced. The actively managed funds that I personally have picked have outperformed the indexes by more than 2% as a portfolio because it's fairly easy to study mutual funds and pick them that outperform. But if you're not going to study them and you're not going to have a good advisor in your corner, then using the index funds is a great idea. Here's what we actually found in the real world versus
So that's also an interesting point. You see that what Dave says there is, I personally choose actively managed mutual funds, but I don't think index funds are awful. If you want to do that, that's great, and you're going to do well over time. So what's interesting, though, is you find indexers very passionate about anyone who doesn't do indexing, that they're a fool, essentially. It's a fool's game of actively managed funds. So that's just an interesting contrast there between the caller, who represents, I feel like, a lot of rabid indexers, and someone like Dave Ramsey, who pursues active management, not personally, but through mutual funds.
Versus someone's hypothetical vacuum discussion of theory, okay? As we studied the largest study of millionaires, 90% of them, the largest study of millionaires ever done, over 10,000 of them, 90% of them became wealthy without inheritance. The inheritance did not cause their wealth. And almost all of them did it with their 401k with actively managed funds. Now, some of the funds actually underperformed the S&P, and some of them overperformed the S&P, and some of them used an S&P because a good 500 fund was in their portfolio as well. Now, let's go back to Warren Buffett for just a second. Are you aware that Warren Buffett does not have all of his investments in index funds?
Of course.
Okay.
So that's an interesting point, too, that he brings up is Warren Buffett advocates indexing, but Warren Buffett didn't build his fortune by indexing. He built his fortune by active management, and active management that he controlled. So Berkshire Hathaway didn't just put all of its capital into index funds. He's advocated it, and I think his point is well taken. He's advocated for people essentially that aren't spending every waking hour studying markets, reading annual reports, choosing between Pepsi or Coke or Home Depot and Lowe's, what's a better allocation of capital. If you actually have a job and a life and other things going on, if you put money in an index fund over the long term, you're likely to outperform 85% of people, 90% of people, 95% of people, again, over the long term, who do nothing but study markets. So dumb money, I think he puts it this way, can outperform smart money, meaning people who know everything. So people who know nothing can outperform people who know everything by simply parking their money in a vanilla index fund over the long term. So that's an interesting point he makes. But again, Dave is bringing up the point here. Warren is not an indexer himself. He's saying you might want to do indexing. I think it's a great choice for you, not for me. So it's kind of do as I say, not as I do.
In a holding company.
I'm not sure, other than the fact that he has stated that the average guy, because he's a Bogleite, the average guy should buy index funds instead of actively managed funds. Other than that, he doesn't actually do what he says he's going to do with that. He actually has an actively managed.
So just, for clarification there, when Buffett passes away, he's instructed 90% of his money to go into the Vanguard S&P index fund, and then 10% in short-term bonds. So upon death, but as he's alive, he's still allocating capital actively.
Managed portfolio called Berkshire Hathaway. Are you aware of that?
Yes, I am. And he's doing it with the money he's leaving to his wife when he dies.
Well, that's fine. I mean, where the money's going is not relevant to the mathematical discussion. The mathematical discussion, Chris, is simply this. Warren Buffett made comments frequently about the average guy should buy index funds. And I really don't have a problem with that. You can get rich with index funds. Not 50% richer. That's complete BS. But
that is true.
But you can get rich with index funds. I don't have any problem with that at all. If that makes me arrogant, fine. But I think we're confused as to who's arrogant on this call, brother. I think that's the issue.
I've got a book suggestion for Chris. It's called How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's a classic. You should read it.
No.
So there you go. So what what I wanted to do here is, after watching this, I was just curious, and I said, you know what? Let me just choose a couple random mutual funds. And I know of Fidelity because of Peter Lynch. I know of their Contra Fund and Magellan Fund. Let me just go on Portfolio Visualizer and choose the Magellan Fund and the Contra Fund and the third one. And so the third one, I found this, I just Googled like great mutual funds, and this one came up. So I just randomly selected the third one. So the other two are sort of superstar, well-known mutual funds. You don't have to necessarily read Morningstar all day, but it's just the Fidelity Magellan, Fidelity Contra Fund, and this one is Mares and Power Growth. So this goes back to 1985, and I think this proves Dave's point to this gentleman. And look, you can look at this, and I'm sure you could find 3 mutual funds that underperformed, but these are sort of randomly selected, 2 that I know of, and then 1 that's random. So you can see, going back to 1985, a $10,000 investment. With the Magellan, you're at 12.02. The Contra Fund, you're at 14.6. This one, the Mares and Power Growth, you're at 13.53. And with this gentleman's S&P 500 index fund, you're at 11.79. All very good. But you can see, and this actually kind of proves that gentleman's point, that it, in a way, that a 2% or a 3% difference over an investing lifetime can really add up. Here, it kind of is sort of disproves his argument for indexing, but proves his point of the power of compounding. So you can see Fidelity's Contra Fund at 14.6 versus this at 11.79. So that's almost 3 percentage points. If it were 14.79, it would be 3 percentage points exactly. So it's what, 2.7, whatever the math is on that. But look at the difference in capital. If you put your money in an index fund, you're at 605,000 here. But Fidelity's Contra Fund, again, 1985 to now, you're at 1.5 million, almost a full $1 million more. Fidelity Magellan and the index fund are almost 1 for 1, 653 to 605. So it's about 40 some thousand difference. And this fund here, 1 over $1 million. Again, it's 13.53. And let me just verify this going back to 1985. You want to just scroll up here. Yep, January 1985 to October of 2021. And again, you could pull up 3 mutual funds, I'm sure, and prove the other way. And I think Dave Ramsey's point is also, look, if you went with the index fund, you're in a good position. You invested $10,000. You never invested again in 1985 till now. And you have, over $500,000. That 10,000 turned into $500,000 through the power of compounding. So we can look at some of the metrics here. Let's look at the Sortino. The Contra Fund has the highest return and the highest Sortino. Sharpe ratio also has the highest Sharpe ratio. The index is 0.6. The Contra is 0.78. The Mars and Power and Growth is 0.71. Market correlation obviously is 0.99 because it is essentially the market, the S&P 500. And yeah, so that's an interesting, and I just pulled this up after watching this, and I don't know if Dave invests in Fidelity, Magellan, or Contra Fund. It seems like he likes growth and income funds or growth funds, and so this one is a growth. And then here is CNBC, and I think this is what articles like this is what the gentleman is referencing here. Active fund managers trail the S&P 500 for the 9th year in a row in triumph for indexing. Active managers who claim that they would do better during periods of heightened volatility are going to have to find another argument. So this is like kind of what passive people say, is that active management always says, oh, well, now is the time for active management. But yet when you study the data, it's not the case. It says for the 9th consecutive year, the majority, 64.49% of large cap funds lag the S&P 500. But that means, 35 outperformed. Now, the argument that indexers would make is if you take over a 5-year period, let's just say it's 10% or 20% that outperform the index. Well, over the next 5 years, it may be 10, 20% again, but it's a different 10 and 20% of funds. It's not the same funds over the most part. Yeah, here it is. After 10 years, 85% of large cap funds underperform the S&P 500. And after 15 years, nearly 92% are trailing the index. So you can see how Warren Buffett says, here, dumb money can outperform smart money simply by acknowledging its limitations. So again, if you put money in an index, you're going to perform 92% of outperform 90% of active management funds who do nothing all day but study markets, read annual reports, listen into earnings calls, who are, their Bloomberg terminal, CNBC, they're on the internet reading. So they're doing all this reading, research, and active stock picking. Yet by just buying and holding an index, you're going to outperform 92% of them. But again, the portfolio visualizer, to Dave's point, showcases that if you've chosen the Fidelity Contra Fund, the Fidelity Magellan Fund, or the other one I mentioned, that there are funds over the long term, this is going back to 1985, that are going to outperform. And these particular funds, the Contra Fund specifically, you'd have over or almost $1 million difference in your retirement, which is a huge difference. So the thing I would say, look, this debate is going to go on in perpetuity, the active versus passive debate. I think the main thing is that you're committed to investing. So if you want to do lower cost mutual funds, ones that outperform over the long term by a lump sum and then dollar cost averaging every month, I think you're going to do quite well. And to Dave Ramsey's point, which he says in that, he has nothing against indexing per se. He's not anti-indexing by any means. If you bought an index fund in 1985 with only 10,000, you have over $600,000 to your name. So yeah, so this is just, again, an interesting video, and it's interesting, I guess, because the guy was kind of a troll. Personally, I have a certain amount that's indexed. I have a certain amount that's individual stock selection. And through Composer, I have certain strategies of trading, quant-based investing, which horrifies a lot of traditional investors, a lot of indexers, by the way. Again, they would view that as a fool's game. But anyways, guys, so that's that. I have probably my most anticipated video coming up next related to Composer, hopefully in the next few days. But hope you enjoyed that. Feel free to put in the comment section your thoughts on this, active versus passive, so on and so forth. All right, guys, take care.